So everyone's feeling good. I know there were people up early taking advantage of the icky weather to be out and about, and I hope you all have recovered from the fun and celebrations of last night. It was a great day yesterday. It really was, and it was really fun to celebrate with everybody. Really wonderful. And it's wonderful to all see you. Many of you probably for your work attend conferences, and usually when you get to the last session of the last day, early in the morning, there's like 4 people in the room. In fact, I used to joke when I was a historian, I'm still a historian, but when I would go to conferences, if you got that slot, you would like be begging your friends, like, could you come because there's not going to be anybody in the room, but look at you, you're all here, which is fantastic. And I know why, because of the topic today. So continuing in the spirit of women supporting women, it's really my pleasure to introduce this morning's keynote speaker, Dr. Holly Phillips from the class of 1993, who's going to share her expertise momentarily on a critical issue that I know faces all of us around the underreported trends in women's health. So although she entered Columbia Medical School shortly after Williams, Holly majored in English while she was here. I was an English major, I always love to hear that. While she was here, and spent her junior year at Oxford as part of the Williams Exeter program. Just another great example of the real-world versatility of our liberal arts education I see here at work. And no surprise that in addition to being an award-winning internist, Holly's also an author and journalist. So I think you can see those attributes coming together in the life after Williams. She's been a medical contributor to CBS News, and has appeared on numerous syndicated television programs and been featured in publications like Prevention, Self, and Vogue. Most relevant to this morning's message to all of you, she's the author of a book maybe some of you are aware of, known as The Exhaustion Breakthrough, published by Rodale Press. Just by a show of hands, how many of you have been exhausted in the last week? There you go, look around. Now, this morning doesn't count, so try again. In the last week, just from work and life, how many of you have been exhausted? Good, okay, me too. Welcome to the club. So, you have a good excuse this morning, but we want to learn a little bit more about exhaustion in the rest of our lives. And so, as you see, you're not alone here, and I know Holly is going to help us understand how to think about and work through some of that. So thank you. A big Williams welcome to you.
Thank you so much for your kind introduction, Maude. And we will just go on ahead and get right into it. If I can wake up my computer, give me 1 second. Maybe I'm going to move this. There. You hear me? Yeah. Great. Okay, so let's click through. We'll skip right through to the beginning, which is good morning. So I'm here with a wake-up call about exhaustion. Yes, that pun was intended. But specifically, I'm referring to the epidemic of exhaustion. Now, epidemic might seem like a really strong term, but if you consider what the most recent data show, according to a 2022 American Psychological Association survey, 3 in 5 Americans felt mentally and emotionally exhausted more often than they did not. In a smaller survey, 3 in 5 Americans describe themselves as more tired now than they've ever been in their lives. 74% of men and 81% of women report that fatigue affects their daily activities and their enjoyment of those daily activities. And exhaustion is so widespread that the British Council of Psychology referred to it as a national energy crisis. So what brought us to this point? How did we get here? Well, abundant evidence points to the fact that the psychological distress and increased demands imposed by the pandemic stoked the already spreading problem of burnout. This is just part of the problem. As of 2022, more than half, 59%, of American workers are experiencing burnout. That is a notable increase over 2021, when just 52% were experiencing burnout. And that's on par with levels reported at the height of the COVID pandemic. But burnout doesn't have to involve the workplace. It doesn't have to involve work at all. And it does not impact everyone equally. Women are 1.5 times more likely than men to report that they rarely or never wake up feeling rested. And WebMD's annual Year in Health survey shows fatigue is consistently near the top of the top 5 health concerns among American women. So, in addition to getting less restful sleep, women take on more housework and more child and elder care responsibilities than men, all of the statistics show. And a 2013 Pew Research study found there's literally no job more exhausting than being a mother. Also, importantly, women suffer disproportionately from some of the common and commonly overlooked medical causes of fatigue, which we'll go over later. So now that's the science and the research. But in my practice, there's another phenomenon which I've observed, which is, of course, totally anecdotal because I'm not the NIH and I didn't do a peer-reviewed study. But I've observed that many women don't really feel as though they deserve energy, right? We kind of tend to view fatigue as this price we're supposed to pay for leading a full life. Exhaustion's kind of explained away or dismissed as this inevitable consequence of balancing whatever it is, work and family, having too much to do in too little time. And also pushing through fatigue is sometimes seen as a badge of honor. You know, this proof that we can do it all, and it's supported by this sort of problematic foundational idea that we should do it all. But this fatigue, which is dismissed as a fact of life, is actually our body's way of telling us to get more rest. So let's take it back to the science really quickly for a few minutes to remind ourselves why we need adequate rest. First and foremost is repair and regeneration. Rest is, of course, I'm taking everybody back to biology class, but essential for protein synthesis. New proteins are the materials the body uses for growth and maintenance, and also to repair and regenerate damaged and worn out cells, tissues, and organs. We all hear this term antioxidant thrown around, but it's very important, and rest is critical to that process. Energy conservation. Rest slows down our metabolic rate, which means the body needs less energy to maintain its basic functions. And the reduced energy expenditure helps us to replenish our energy stores. Importantly and timely, immune system optimization. So during sleep, the body produces cytokines, we're really doing biology here, that regulate the immune system. Cytokines stimulate the production of white blood cells, which are essential for fighting off infections. Hormonal balance. Adequate rest is essential. It allows the release of hormones such as cortisol and melatonin, which play critical roles in the body's metabolism, our circadian rhythms, allowing us to get sleep so we don't fall into a vicious cycle. And they also help to regulate our emotional balance. And finally, memory consolidation. During rest, the brain processes inputs, which is essential for learning and cognitive function. Another way to think about it is that lack of rest is linked with cardiovascular disease, cerebrovascular disease, cancer, diabetes, and Alzheimer's. Rest deprivation compromises core cognitive functions, including computation, concentration, working memory, and the capacity for logical reasoning. So anyone who's spent more than a few minutes with a toddler knows that sleep deprivation can lead to meltdowns. So for adults, those meltdowns can have far more profound consequences than just throwing the toys out of the crib. So interestingly, sleep deprivation quite literally led to the biggest meltdown in history. Investigators ruled that lack of rest was a critical factor in causing the Chernobyl disaster, as well as the 3 Mile Island accident, the Exxon Valdez oil spill, and the explosion of the Space Shuttle Challenger. If you've pulled an all-nighter, you probably understand how lack of rest leads to productivity problems and errors. But to illustrate how the epidemic of exhaustion can quickly slip into a public health crisis that poses a national hazard, let's consider how fatigue contributes to traffic fatalities. The Institute of Medicine estimates fatigue is responsible for 20% of crashes. Drowsy driving causes approximately 1 million crashes, 500,000 injuries, and 8,000 deaths each year in the US. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that it's possible to get enough sleep yet still suffer from lack of rest, because sleep is not synonymous with rest. Rest has more than one dimension. Sleep is a physical form of rest, but our bodies also require sensory rest. Our senses can get overwhelmed by lights, noise, the nonstop motion, and olfactory assaults. We need the occasional break from our overstimulating existences. We also need emotional rest. So socializing, caregiving, and coping with stress are aspects of life that can be as exhausting as a marathon. Practicing self-care and seeking social support from spiritual advisors, psychologists, or just most importantly our communities are essential elements of rest. And finally, and this is hard for us EIFs, it's important not to forget our intellects need rest. Although the demands of the day can be nonstop cognitive exertion is unsustainable. Our brains need breaks to continue functioning optimally. It's worth noting, while exhaustion and burnout are so inextricably linked that colloquially they're kind of used interchangeably, burnout tends to be rooted in these other forms of rest, right? A lack of these other forms of rest, from sensory, emotional, and intellectual, even more so than sleep. So often I find my patients are so acclimatized to their exhaustion that they don't even really realize they're exhausted. Unfortunately, there is no current standard systematic tool for gauging fatigue. I really wish that there were. I think an assessment of exhaustion should be as routine a part of an annual checkup as our other vital signs like blood pressure, heart rate, and respirations. But until that tool is developed, the leading academic tool by which exhaustion is measured is called the Maslow Burnout Inventory. And it asks a number of questions. Among them are, how strongly do you identify with these statements? I feel worn out at the end of the day. I feel emotionally drained at the end of the day. I feel tired when I wake up in the morning. I feel that I am at the end of my rope. And it also asks the question, how rarely do you feel exhilarated or energetic? Now, truthfully, the scoring for this Maslow inventory is really complicated and tedious in practice. It's kind of one of those scoring tools like BMI, which stands for Body Mass Index, which it's useful on a population basis, right? If you plug 200 million people into it, it's remarkably accurate, but it's not so great for individual assessments. But still, I do find that the questions are sort of good food for thought, just to start a conversation with my patients about their energy levels. So why am I so focused on this topic? The answer is that it is very personal for me because I was tired for 20 years straight. I had severe and debilitating fatigue from morning to night. From the moment I woke up, I'd start thinking about how and when I could take a nap. I truly did. I struggled every day to get through the day. But despite this exhaustion, like a lot of people, especially women, I just kind of forced myself to keep going, minute by minute, hour by hour. I kept it moving. I fulfilled all my daily tasks and just kept pushing through. During those 2 decades, I became a wife, a mother, a private practice doctor, a hospital faculty member, and a national news medical correspondent. But I was drained, I was depleted, and I was completely broken. I was really not enjoying this life that I had built. So ironically, during one of my most severe periods of exhaustion, I was in medical training. And later, I was this full participant in this really robust medical community in New York City. And I was surrounded by and had open access to some of the most brilliant doctors I've ever known. But yet still, even with that position of access, privilege, and awareness, it was hard to get anyone, including myself, to really delve deep into my diagnosis of fatigue. It was kind of brushed off with, oh, you're in medical school, you're supposed to be tired, you're a resident, there's nothing wrong with you, you have young children, you're supposed to feel like this. But I really knew I wasn't supposed to feel that way. Eventually, I was diagnosed with a couple of medical conditions, the most serious of which was fibromyalgia. But the diagnoses were an important acknowledgement for me that the fatigue wasn't all in my head, but unfortunately, they didn't add up to a solution kind of right away. Over time, I tried so many interventions, from traditional medicine, psychiatric treatments, cognitive behavioral approaches, alternative and complementary therapies, herbal medications, every nutritional supplement known to man. I think I'm still glowing in the dark from some of those supplements. Don't turn off the lights. Acupuncture, meditation, infrared therapy, red light therapy, yoga, cold plunge, hot plunge, hypnosis. I even gave an oxygen chamber a whirl. It actually worked. It's really wonderful. Michael Jackson was onto something. It's just not so sustainable. Where am I putting one of those in my apartment? So through this process of trial and error, I'm much improved. I do not have it all figured out. But I wrote the Exhaustion Breakthrough just to offer a roadmap for those who might be looking to improve their energy levels. My favorite part of the book really just offers some quick and easy tips to set a foundation for your best energy, which I will share now. So, let me click. Here are the 7 top tips. Number 1. First, before you can fix your fatigue, you have to know what triggers it, what makes it better and what makes it worse. Often the things that are draining our energy are hidden right in plain sight. So keeping a fatigue diary can help you get a clear view of your energy peaks and valleys so you can start to connect them with the causes. I suggest that every day for a week you rate your previous night's sleep, you jot down everything you eat and drink, and most importantly, when you do it. Note your physical activities, your stress levels throughout the day, and your energy levels throughout the day. So charting those ebbs and flows of energy can help you identify what's really depleting you. There are tons of apps. One is Sleep Score, and it does a lot of this work for you. I do find when my patients write things down, there's something meaningful in that as well. But if you're an app person, have at it. It works too. Next, ask your doctor to be screened for the top 5 hidden medical causes of female fatigue. They're not really hidden. They're just kind of overlooked. We'll put it that way. Number 1 is thyroid disorders. So thyroid, the little butterfly-shaped gland in our neck, it produces hormones that regulate how our body burns fuel for energy. Thyroids can become overactive or underactive, but either way, they end up triggering fatigue. Number 2 is heart disease. Heart disease, especially in women, can present with atypical symptoms, right? Women don't always get crushing chest pain or the pain shooting down the arm or what we think of as symptoms of angina and heart disease. Fatigue can be a presenting sign in women. Vitamin D, another issue that's been called an epidemic is vitamin D deficiency. Over the last few decades, the numbers of women who are deficient have really exploded. It's for a number of reasons, but part of the reason is that we have been avoiding the sun, which is great to prevent skin cancer, but not so great for our vitamin D levels. Whatever the reason, supplements work as well. But too little of the essential vitamin can sap our bone strength and our vitality. And there's a good body of research that links vitamin D deficiency to chronic fatigue syndrome and myalgic encephalitis. And last, second to last, iron deficiency anemia. If you're iron deficient, your blood can't carry enough oxygen throughout your body, and so you feel sluggish. There's other forms of anemia, B12 deficiency, whether it's from dietary restrictions or an autoimmune illness called pernicious anemia. B12 deficiency also saps energy. These are very easy blood tests to run. And they may not be run unless you ask for them. So I just pointed out. Last is depression. People who are depressed are more than 4 times as likely to be severely fatigued. Those who are severely fatigued are almost 3 times as likely to be depressed. So treating and recognizing depression can also pay this double dividend of improving our sleep, which has a restorative effect, directly boosting our energy levels. The next tip is to stay hydrated. So dehydration is one of the most common causes of fatigue, crankiness, and foggy thinking. So even before you feel thirsty, you may feel tired. The body's thirst mechanism kind of kicks in typically after your hydration level has dropped by 2.6%. So even when you're mildly dehydrated, the fluid loss from your body causes a drop in blood volume, forcing your heart to work harder, to push oxygen, everything through your bloodstream. And so for energy boosting purposes, try to focus on consuming at least 3 liters daily. I keep a liter bottle and I try and refill it and note how many times I'm doing it. Alcohol, unfortunately, doesn't count as fluid. It triggers dehydration and really disrupts the deepest stages of our sleep cycle, leaving us fatigued. So recharge through exercise. What's interesting is if you walk for 10 minutes a day, you get 2 hours of energy. That's how long you get revved up, just after a quick 10-minute walk outside, according to research. So make a deal with yourself, just get moving for 10 minutes, even if you're absolutely wiped out, and commit to it to see what happens. Also, longer cardiovascular activities. Of course, I'm talking about the heart healthy approach, the 30 minutes 5 days a week, the 40 minutes 4 days a week. They increase our breathing rate, our blood flow, and ultimately they increase our mitochondrial production and function, giving us long-term energy. So poor posture doesn't just make you tired. Everybody freeze. I see you. I see you. What I intended to do was have us do a kind of a seated posture check. So, since you guys are all cheating. So while you're seated, let's check our posture. Is your head lined up over and not in front of your body? Are your ears directly over your shoulders? Is your neck in line with your spine? Are your shoulders rounded forward or held back and down with your shoulder blades in close contact? Is there a slight but not pronounced curve in your back? Is your head in line with your hips? And is your body weight distributed evenly on both hips with your legs uncrossed? I knew I was throwing it in there just to catch you. You were doing good till that, right? So sitting with your legs crossed at the knee actually can bump up your blood pressure. And frequent crossing of your legs, it puts strain on your hip joints, causes pooling of blood in your legs, and that pooling can make you feel more tired. So uncross. And so from this, I'm sure you've gleaned, poor posture doesn't just make you look tired, it makes you feel tired too. It places this excess strain on your back and your hips, and you're blowing through energy that you really don't have to. Your body's simply working harder than it should, which leads to fatigue. So keep that in mind. There are also apps that will remind you to check your posture every couple of minutes. I've never downloaded one, but they exist. But just kind of keeping it in the back of your mind and improving your posture, you should enjoy an energy boost along with it. This one is pretty straightforward, and I think we all know it. We've all felt it, right? But still, it's easy to overlook how important it is to eat for energy. The most energy, the best nutrients for energy really come from whole foods that are in their recognizable form, right? Vegetables, fruits, grains, nuts, seeds, beans, lean protein. High fiber foods, focus on fiber for energy. They boost your metabolism and they keep your blood sugar stable all day to help you prevent those sort of peaks and valleys. High fiber foods are everything, but really everything listed here. But think lentils, berries, oats, chia seeds. When working with patients who have fatigue, I prefer to focus on what to add to their diets rather than what to take away. That having been said, minimizing our intake of highly processed foods, right? I mean, things that come in packages that have 40 ingredients. Minimizing those, particularly those that also end in ose, your high fructose corn syrup, sucrose, glucose. Avoiding those really, and drinks too, yeah. It helps to maintain your blood sugar at steady levels all day. Finally, and of course most obviously, sleep. Sound sleep is critical. So there are people who have a gene which allows them to function well on just 6 hours of sleep a night. Researchers at UC San Francisco found that, unfortunately though, that gene appears in less than 3% of the population. The other 97% of us need between 7 and 9 hours of shut-eye to be our sharpest selves. So dedicate at least 8 hours for sleep each night, right? Set yourself a curfew and try to sleep at the same time every night and wake up at the same time every morning. Create a sleep sanctuary. So the room should be ideally between 60 and 67 degrees, quiet and dark. If natural light is an issue, blackout shades or a sleep mask are worth it. If you're like me and New York City noise enters your sanctuary, a white noise machine can make a huge difference. And then light. At least 30 minutes before bed, turn off your computer and the TV and charge your mobile phone in another room if you can. Blue light from all of those devices can delay the release of melatonin from our brain. And melatonin is critical for helping us sort of set the stage. It lets your brain know that it's time to start shutting down for sleep. Scan the bedroom for blinking and glowing lights and turn these off or cover the lights. One last thing on sleep, we said quiet space. Think about doing a bath. A warm bath raises your body temperature, and when you climb out of the bath, your body cools down quickly. This process is actually thought to mimic the natural drop in body temperature that your brain triggers naturally, thus helping you fall asleep. One last tip is to abandon your bed for a spare bed if you usually share with a heavy snorer, or an early riser or a restless sleeper. If your partner is taking it personally, I'll write you a doctor's note. I've got you. But intimacy is important, but it's really impossible when we're sleep deprived. So intimacy is one thing, but truthfully, sleep is a solitary activity. So you got to do what you got to do for that. And the final takeaway really is that fatigue is not your fate. If you are feeling fatigued, there are tools in the arsenal that can help you. And thank you guys so much for your time.